Hey everybody, it's me, Everyday Nerdy here, and today I'm basically redoing the Dark Souls sword, starting from beginning to new ending, and full disclosure, I still am not happy with how it came out, but if I keep delaying it and then forget about it, it's going to be 5 months, like what happened now, and I don't have a video. So, I'm just going to put it out there, and we're going to go back into these videos, so let us begin. So we're going to start first with the sketch of the sword outline. So we're going to start with the center part, then we're going to do perpendicular to the handles. So once we do that, the next step is to now do the spline part of the sword. And you can do however you want to do the spline. But after you do that, the next step is to do a line that's on the edge of the spline, and we're going to use this line as a point of reference for creating a plane at an angle. So it could be a construct or a construction line, I believe that's what it's called. And once that's done, we're going to extrude from the sketch we've just created to create our sword. Now I know it doesn't look like a sword yet because we're going to carve out our sword. So we're going to rotate the sword, and from the bottom we're going to sketch a line, like a triangle line, whatever you call that line, then another line that reaches out like this, and the angle between those two lines will be the angle we use when we create our plane at an angle. Now we also use this center line as a mirroring plane to make sure our lines are symmetrical. Now within two new shapes that we've created, we're going to extrude those, and we're going to use the spline as a point of reference to follow it, so that this will now carve out the sword we've just created, so it will have a perfect, like, this type of shape. And that's the reason I didn't do drafting tool, because it's like this perfectly. It's not like edged and then slightly straight at the end, whatever. So as you can see with the line, we've created our construct plane, and we use the same angle that we had that was in between this point of reference. Now that we have that, we're going to create a sketch on the construct plane, and we're going to project the body onto that sketch so we can hide the body. And then after this, I took the liberties to just figure it out and hope for the best. And I create splines by pairs when I created the details on the sword. And you'll see why shortly I did that. So I'm not going to show you me creating all the splines. So here are all the splines, just a bunch of splines in pairs. And after that, I do a split face for every spline. So each spline will be splitting the face on the body. And voila, so you can see that. Now with that being done, the body has a bunch of faces now in it. So all those swim lanes, you can call that, is what I'll be using to push in like a form of a groove texture. So then the sword will have like a little groove in there. And then once all those things are pushed in slightly, the next thing to do is to use the chamfer tool. But the one thing I noticed with the chamfer tool was that because the splines are, vary a lot, you can't use one chamfer for all. You might have to split the chamfers in between them and use that little plus sign when you do chamfer to do different chamfers, and then voila, it looks great. I love this. Now that that's done, my favorite tool, I like mirroring. It just saves a lot of time. So once this is done, you want to mirror the front sword, well, the left sword to the right to create the front of the sword. And then once you have the front of the sword done, you're gonna have to split the body, and you're gonna have to take that front sword, join those bodies if they're not joined already, and then mirror them to the back. So then you have a full complete sword done. If you want, you can do different textures, and you don't have to do this, and you can just repeat the process but do different designs, front, back, whatever you want to do. But this is how I did a quick roundabout way of creating the sword. Now the next step is to cut out the sword and prepare for the handles. So for this step, I drew lines and I couldn't get them to connect. I made them symmetrical by using the center line as a point of reference to mirror the line. So I just split the body one line by line. But then another issue was I had to do this before I did the last mirroring because I ran into a problem. I don't know what it was, but it wouldn't work unless I did it before the last mirror. But after that, nonsense. So you do a construct plane, you do an offset, and then we're going to project all our lines onto the construct plane. I do this because I'm going to take that bottom design and push it up, extrude it up, if you want to say the correct word. Extrude it up, and I do a taper because I noticed the handle is like slightly like, here's a handle and here's a sword. Like, I don't know if that explains it right, but there's a slight offset, and this is how I was able to create that offset. And then the next thing is, once that offset is completed, if you look, because it's tapered, the left and right side are pushed off too much. So I had to visually do my best and see if I could get them to be pushed up. And so I just pressed them up, a little bit so I could be angled a bit better with my eyes. And I did what I do to one side, you got to do the other. I didn't really mirror this one, but sometimes you gotta do the hard work. Now after that, this one I still not sure why it wasn't working in the beginning, but I was using the sweep tool and I used the face that we just pushed in to create the sweep of the handle. And so it kept going cutting and it was being weird and I got these errors, but then when I moved the left side that was closer to the center, it started to work and that's how I got it working. And I was like, ooh, that looks nice, but you notice it's really wide. So after I did that, I just used the drafting tool and I used the center point that was the inner part. And then I did that. And that is what allowed me to then make it look like that. And then I have the habit of just like rotating things and checking things at all angles because I just want to make sure nothing slipped. Because sometimes when I do things and they're at different angles, like I notice something wrong with them. So now that that's done, you could mirror this right away, but there's no reason to rush that. So I'm now going to start doing the handle. So the handle has these two cylinder things. So I do a construct. I like to do construct plane just for safety. And then I do a circle. And I'm going to extrude this circle. And then once I extrude this circle, I'm going to extrude it again. But when I extrude it again, I want to make sure you select new bodies because then I can do fillets on the circle. If you don't do new body, you're just going to have a giant cylinder. And it's not going to look that good because it's a giant cylinder. You want them divided. I mean, you could do a giant cylinder, then split body mid-plane later on. Sure, whatever makes it easier. I just made them like this, and then I do a fillet. And after that, I'm extruding out of the circle I just created. And looking back, I think I should have done a revolve because sword handles don't look good when they're straight like that. I don't know. So either way, go back to my construct plane lifestyle. And then I'm projecting the circle that we originally did in the beginning of the handle. So I'm always going to keep projecting that circle over and over and creating these cylinders as a point of reference just to make it easier. So if I ever adjust that first circle, I can just go to the construct plane that they should technically automatically adjust because they're just being projected from one to another. So here I'm using the drafting to create this part of the cylinder. And I projected that inner line to use as a point of reference. So that's when I'm using the axis. When you draft something, you click an axis. And then I use the intersection tool to find where the plane intersects with that circle that is the opposite perpendicular of the sketch, if that makes any sense. So after I do that, I know this is the reason I'm revolving this one is because the inner part, I'm trying to make it a bit more like round. So you can do like a spline or use the arc tool to create the curvature if you want to. I also create a line as a point of reference to make sure something's straight. But that was just me just making sure like how I can visually see the curve. That's it. Nothing serious. And you hit revolve. You make sure you check the polygon you just created, the 2D one, and the center line as a point of access. So, and then we're doing the same thing we did before. But okay, so here I turn sketches off just so I can make sure I'm looking at the correct sketch. That's just me. It's nothing too crazy. But I'm still doing the same thing, going back, projecting the original circle, and then just extruding it to make sure it's just going to match the rest of the ones. And I do know the handle does not match at all the photo. You know when you get caught up and you don't realize like, oh man, this doesn't match. This one I was like, oh man, this handle does not match. And I was like, did I mess up the photo? But no worries, no worries. I'm going to go back and fix it eventually, which should be now, hopefully. I think, is this now when I realize it's wrong? Because right now I'm trying to do the rest of the handle, which I'm doing the intersection of the bottom piece. Oh, so yeah, it is. This is where I'm like, oh, this is way too big. So that's where I cut where I drafted. Well, I didn't cut. I just drew a line and I just increased the line. And then I'm probably going to redo the arc and redo the spline. But it's the same concept, just shrinking it. So, and because I did a construct plane, I can just reselect the plane of where the construct was selected and everything that I drew will readjust, which is cool. So now we're back to creating the last part. So it was basically the same thing that how we did the other handle. The main thing with the drafting tools, you always got to remember to use an intersecting tool when you are trying to make sure things are lined up. And what I mean by that is, so for example, let's say here's the handle, and this is like where it's going to continue drafting, or this is where you would grab the handle in real life. When I have a plane here that I'm drawing on, and if I do the intersection tool, the plane will tell me where this intersects with this item that's here. So that's why I make sure the lines I'm creating on this plane where I'm going to revolve lines up with the handle that's already there. So that's the most important thing. Intersection and projection are very, I like them a lot. Maybe as much as mirroring. So here I'm doing the very end of the sword, which is looks kind of like a little like round thing on the bottom, like a little nubby thing. And so what I'm planning on doing is I'm planning on doing a lofting. And with that, I'm going to create an outer circle, which you've seen me do right now. And then I'm going to loft that to a point. You don't have to do a point. I created a circle because a circle automatically creates a point, which is why I did the circle on the offset. And then I just make sure it's not a sharp, pointy loft. And then voila. That looks nice. And here is where I use the mid plane, so I can find the mid plane between the top handle, and I can just mirror the top handles, little handle sections from one side to the other, which is nice. And then something happened with my editing, and so basically I adjusted the size of what I extruded. Let me pause. Sorry. I adjusted the size of what I extruded, and I lost. I don't know. Something happened. I don't know what to say. And those circles were all adjusted to be maybe like I did maybe 1.5 or 0.5 something millimeters. And then I readjusted the fillet. And then when I did that, everything stayed the same because I had the construct line set up. But this one part got messed up. So I'm just redoing this part that got messed up for me adjusting the length of the cylinders I made. So, and then this is like the actual size of me adjusting the cylinder because this one came out good. Well, this one didn't get messed up, so I had to redo this. And this is basically the size I had, and then creating the fillet on it so it can be readjusted. Because, yeah, I realized it didn't. But you can see here, I use the intersect tool for that part of the handle, and I use a consonant with what I already have to make sure it's gonna connect. Because the consonant tool will just like make things join, which is neat. And the arc tool to recreate the little nub end section that was created. And so I'm going to extend it because it's not touching it. So I'm going to extend it. Did this part a little bit differently. And I got to just, revolve it. So it's going to revolve because that's already done. So I'm just going back right now and fixing the issues from me fixing things. So since I did a construct plane, like I said, this is why I like doing it. Is when you change something, you can just go back and select the plane that's related to the new part of where the construct plane is going to be. It makes it easier. And here I notice with all these changes, the outer circle I did is not big enough for the lofting because it looks weird. So I just have to go back and create a larger offset of the circle and then just redo the lofting. So that's what I'm going to do. But sometimes when I redo the lofting, I mess up. So I just, because instead of like adding it as the current face, it adds it like it's a new face it's lofting to. So it gets weird. So that's just me redoing all this stuff. I thought about editing this out, but I think it's good for people to see like the process and when someone goes back and fixes something. And then I added the chamfer tool at the end because chamfer tools look nice. Now, for this one, I'm creating a final detail in the handle, and I use construct planes, and I use the previous construct plane. And what I'm doing is, so there's two ways you could probably do this. I am doing circles. And you don't have to do a circle. I just thought a circle was easiest. You can do any odd shape you want. And so I do a circle on one, and then I project that circle onto the other construct plane. And so you can either just loft it and not have it be a rails. So they just loft one another, and I'm going to do cut. And you can see it's going to make an indent. And I think that's a nice, cool looking feature, which I've seen how people do this on handles. And then now that feature is done, you can just do a circular pattern and find the circle part of the cylinder and select it as your axis and type the number of times you want it. Make sure you got to do feature when you're doing this. You want to duplicate this feature on the handle, and it looks really nice. And so this is just doing it the easier route. But if you want the lofting to have more of a, what's the word? Of a direction per se, what you could do to make sure you're sketching on the correct direction is you can do axes through 2 points. It says a circle has 2 points. I create an axis through 2 points, and then I create a construct plane on that line where you can do construct at an angle. And then on that construct plane, I'm going to create a sketch, and then I'm going to draw whatever I want and just make sure the circles are touching one another. So, like, draw, I don't know, a spline, a deep curve, a light curve. As you can see what I'm doing, I'm just creating a gentle curve, something basic. I think this is a cool way to edit like cylindrical objects or just anything in general. I think this is a really cool thing. And voila, see, so when I lost it, I made sure it followed the new line I created. You can see it looks slightly different. So if you want to be a more specific thing. And I just, if you change one, that's when I forgot, like, oh, I projected it. So when I changed the top one, I changed the bottom one, and I didn't even remember. But yeah, so this is how the sword looks overall. I'll be honest, I'm not exactly thrilled with it, but I do plan on going back and just fixing those handles because it's bothering me so much. But I gotta get back. I gotta get back on these videos. So hopefully you guys like this. I know the editing was a bit rough, but bear with me. It's been a while. So bye.